Why I would encourage, entrepreneurs maybe listening to really think about just on a human level, are you excited to partner with this person? There's a lot of promise out there about all the ancillary benefits of a VC, whether that's their brand or whether that's their talent partner or whatever else. None of that matters compared to, are you just excited to be in a meeting with this person, receive a phone call from them?
I'm Patrick J. McGinnis, and I coined the term FOMO. That's short for fear of missing out, and it's why some people end up following the crowd when they should be blazing a trail of their own. But if you want to achieve greatness in business and life, you've got to break free. Come on, I'll show you how. This is FOMO Sapiens, where we explore how entrepreneurial thinkers find the inspiration and the courage to build exceptional lives. Welcome back to another episode of FOMO Sapiens, the show for entrepreneurial thinkers. I'm your host, Patrick J. McGinnis. Today, we're talking to Michael Wolf, CEO of ResortPass, the leading online booking platform for day guests to access hotel amenities, spas, day rooms, and more. Now, Michael is a seasoned executive who spent more than 20 years building, advising, and scaling successful wellness and marketplace companies, including ClassPass, which was acquired by MindBody. And of course, we had the founder of ClassPass on the show a couple seasons back, and Supernatural, that was acquired by Meta. Michael holds an undergraduate degree from Columbia and an MBA from the Wharton School of Business at Penn. And I think it's kind of fun that Michael is the second of the Wolf siblings to come on FOMO Sapiens. His sister Sally was the first ever interview I did on FOMO Sapiens. She was the second episode aired, but the first interview I ever did. She is a really amazing person too. So, just a good family. And today we're going to talk about entrepreneurship. We're going to talk about how a guy like Michael comes into an existing company as CEO, raises money in the VC winter, and builds a really cool company that I'm sure some of you use. And if you don't, when you hear about what it does, you're going to want to use it. Welcome to FOMO Sapiens, Michael Wolf.
Thank you very much for having me, Patrick. Very much appreciate it.
Yeah, I'm glad to have you here. Just full disclosure, Michael is also a friend of mine. Not all the time. If he behaves himself, he is. But we've known each other for a while. And so I'm really excited that you're finally here. I've been watching, your journey at ResortPass. So we're going to get into all of that, of course. But let's start, I always ask the same question to start the show. And even you, Michael, will not escape me. The question is this. Tell me something unexpected you learned about yourself that changed everything.
Oh, I love building, and I didn't know that was unexpected. I think when I started my career, I didn't even know what I wanted to do. I always thought I was going to be in the FBI, and I was a finalist to be in the FBI.
Wow.
And I thought that was going to be my path, government and service and politics. And I think from my first hint of startup world, I realized that building is just so satisfying. And it's not something that, a lot of people know. They do that junior year summer internship at Goldman Sachs or some other kind of investment banker consulting firm. They kind of know that's their track. That wasn't me. I remember that when I got my offer to go to Bain and Company, the consulting firm, after undergrad, and no one had heard of who I was. And they had given out a couple offers and when I was there. And I took a business school class the second semester of my senior year of undergrad. And there's a few undergrads in the class. And during the break, it was a 3-hour class, an hour and a half in, there's a break. And we had to go around right at the beginning of the class and announce ourselves and who we were. And someone came up to me during that break and goes, "You're Michael Wolf?" And I'm like, "Yeah." They're like, "You're the other person who got the Bain offer. No one knew who you were. You weren't part of like the business undergraduate society and all this stuff." And so I never kind of knew I was going to be on this path. But once I was on the path and then eventually in operating, I realized that I just love, that's what I love. And that's what gives me a lot of satisfaction.
Well, that story is, it's a good one. It also reminds me that I couldn't get a job in consulting to save my life out of undergrad or business school because I'm terrible at the case study interview. So I guess I'm just using this as an opportunity to cry about my failures. But let's turn it back to you, Michael. You're my guest today. And I want to talk about, let's just start with give me the pitch for ResortPass.
Yeah. So we enable day access to the hospitality industry. So you're not staying overnight at a hotel, but you can use the amenities. Things like pools, cabanas, spa, fitness, wellness, even the room itself, all for the day. And the way I like to think about it is that we all interact with hotels usually only while we're traveling. And it's kind of crazy, right? Because we pass hotels all the time and we assume that's not for us when we're in our home community, when we're in our local environment. And yet 95% of the time for most Americans, they're sleeping in their own bed. They're not traveling, right? And the analogy I draw, I'm sitting here in our headquarters in Union Square. I live up in the Nomad area of New York City. For those who don't know, it's around a 15-block walk. Every single day I walk those 15 blocks. I pass 10 hotels. And historically, as a local, I assumed that there was no interaction for me in the entire hospitality world. Yet their whole appeal was a traveler who might literally come once in a lifetime. And Resort Pass is really about the rise of the day guest in hospitality. And that's exactly what we're doing. And we've now serviced over 3 million people. We work with 1,600 hotels, and we're just getting started.
Yeah, it is like one of these things that's once you hear it, you're like, oh, that's a good idea. Because you think about you live in a place like New York City. I mean, over the summer this year, it's been so hot, right? And so what is you go on Resort Pass and you make for a small investment instead of like getting on in a plane or renting a car or borrowing a car, whatever, if you even drive, to go to use some pool somewhere, you can make a modest investment to have a day access to a pool. Or maybe if you want to work somewhere, maybe you are in town for the day and you want to take a nap, whatever it is for you. This is something that like wasn't easy to resource before. And so you've kind of created this category in a sense. So that's the pitch for Resort Pass. Now I want to turn it on to you, which is you joined this company's CEO. It was an existing business, right? So what was the pitch for Michael Wolf to be the CEO of Resort Pass?
Yeah. So for years, I've been advising usually 4 to 6 founders, CEOs, and executive teams at a time. And I was waiting to find the thing that I was super passionate about to go back into. And I met with virtually every company in New York, and the executive search firms in New York kind of thought he's never really going to go back and do something. They kind of, I think, had given up on me. And I really just was waiting for the right thing. And I started advising the company, and I fell in love with the business. And usually when I advise companies, I don't fall in love with the business. If for those who are in the startup world, when you kind of dig underneath, things can be a lot messier than they appear externally. This was one of the rare businesses that underneath it was the business was even stronger. And I don't just mean on like unit economics or financials, but I mean the underlying what we did. We satisfied hotels and created this new revenue stream for hotels, and we really made people happy. And I'd never been a part of a business where I just thought that we make people happy on a Tuesday, and that's ultimately what we do. And in a way that was so beautiful because it had this serendipity. Because people don't know the concept even exists, there's this extra moment of beauty. I didn't even know you could do this, and I had this great experience. And I just started advising the company, and I fell in love with it. And I say this to this day that I am not the founder, but I have the excitement of a founder. In 20 years of startups, I've never been this excited about something. And for me, the real takeaway about that is you can be that excited about something. I think I vacillated for years, like, oh, maybe my bar's too high. Maybe, you just always have to make trade-offs. When it feels right, it'll feel right. And I know it's not always the easiest thing to say, but it's worth the wait is kind of was the biggest lesson to me about finding my next operating role.
Yeah, I'll give you guys some context on that. So, as I mentioned, Michael and I know each other, and during the pandemic, we'd go on these long walks. Like, Michael, you love a good walk, and so we would walk around New York City, and we'd be talking about our lives and advising each other as friends do. And Michael would always talk about what he, trying to figure out, like, what should I do next? And I would always say to him, Michael, you have FOBO. You have fear of a better option. I would, because like, obviously I'm going to use my own framework, right? That's what we do. And so when this came along and you joined the company, I was like, the FOBO has been vanquished. And I guess for you, like, okay, so you just kind of explained that to us, but I want to dig a little deeper because I think so many people who, in building their careers, they hope for that moment where I've had similar moments of insight where it's like, you don't know what you're going to do. And you're like, I don't know. And then one day it just gets clear. And was it for you, like you said, you started advising them. Was it like day one? Like what was the moment where you're like, oh, this is it?
It wasn't day one. I think that's a great lesson for all of us. And it might not be that instant love at first sight. But as I dug deeper, I think what I did realize is I only got more excited by the business. A lot of times, the more time you spend with a business, it goes in the opposite direction.
Yeah.
And what I say, and I say this very publicly, and it's so true, every day I get more excited by this business. I get excited both because I think the underlying business model is really great and has a lot of opportunity. But I get excited because I meet with our hotel partners and they could not be more excited about what we're doing. And I meet with our customers and see our customer reviews and see how much satisfaction they get. And it's truly one of the few businesses I've been involved with that's kind of a win-win. And just to take a step one, level back, if you really think about what we're doing, we are providing this moment of escapism, this moment of joy in a way that was never before possible, and usually only comes about the once or twice a year that most people get to go away on vacation. And we're basically doing that on a single day, getting away without going away. We have a couple of good one-liners on this. But the reality is, and we, commissioned some research, 85% of people feel recharged after a single day off.
Yeah.
And you'll see that. You'll see that in the reviews. People feel a moment of recharge. The founder's original vision was basically saying, in America, most Americans get 2 to 3 weeks of vacation off. What's that ongoing way of recharging? What's that ongoing way of having balance in your life? We accomplished that. And that's just a really fun thing to be a part of. And that's being the mission of the company.
Yeah, it's true. There are all these hotels that have invested so much money in their spa program or their pool program. And then, they don't, it's like the rest of us don't get to partake in it. But having used Resort Pass, and that's hot summer, you must just love your job because you get to go to pools all the time. I mean, that's like my dream. But it is interesting that the more time you spent, the more you realize it. And I think that building conviction around something in entrepreneurship, it's really hard to do. But when you get there, it's very powerful. FOMO. I want to go back a little bit, Michael, because you started out, you as we mentioned, you've had a couple different roles in operations, and you were the head of ops at ClassPass, which is, of course, we had Pyle on the show, and a lot of people love ClassPass. And it was, I imagine, in some ways, very sort of important to building the skills that have allowed you to do something like become the CEO of Resort Pass. So just for folks who are thinking about how to build a career, talk a little bit about what you didn't learn there that you've had to develop to become the CEO of a company.
I always think the things that you don't officially learn, whether that's in business school or in consulting or, reading books, are actually the most important things. So the most important things I need to do on a daily basis is inspire. And that's inspiring the team. It's inspiring our hotel partners, is to write. Again, the kind of correspondence and other things that I need to do, and is to really sell. And sell sometimes has a negative connotation, but I always think it's fascinating that some of the core skill sets I just laid out, inspiring, writing, and selling, are not something that's generally taught, in my experience, in business school. They're not necessarily taught, in management consulting or investment banking or any of those kind of training grounds. And they're things you kind of have to learn a little bit on your own, a little bit learn from people that you see that do them really well and kind of help mirror, what they do well. But, back to ClassPass, I learned a lot, for sure. I didn't learn those things explicitly, but what I learned at ClassPass was, we had challenges, in the business model when I joined. We were unlimited. For those who remember, you got unlimited classes every single month, but it was a fixed price. So we had a variable cost product with a fixed revenue, and that doesn't really work. And so, to give you a sense, we had a user who would take 180 boutique fitness classes every single month. So every single month.
Wait, how does it even work?
I'm not exaggerating. 5 a.m., 6 a.m., 7 p.m., and 5 p.m., 6 p.m., 7 p.m. So they did work in the middle of the day.
Did you know this person? Jeez.
No, not only did I not know them, but at the time, the majority of the users at ClassPass were female. And this was a male user. They had no social media presence. So we actually sent someone from our customer experience team to see if it was a real person, because we thought it might have been fraud. It was a real person. They were just very fit and beloved by the fitness studios. But also that user obviously, was costing us, I think it was like $5,000-$6,000 a year. And,
wow.
We were only charging $100 a month. And so, sorry, $5,000-$6,000 a month. So I think, overall, and I think this is something that I've always said about the way I lead startups, is I really think about both aspirationally leading companies and building companies, but also doing so in a really rational way. And I think that's what we do in New York. I think that's what we do better in New York. I think New York startups tend to be a little bit more real. And that might mean that this New York startups ultimately maybe are a little bit smaller than some of the companies that come out of the West Coast. But I also think, and I don't have the data for this, but that there might be actually a higher hit rate in New York because people have more of like a business sense that's just embedded by living in New York. And that's always been who I've been. That's always the way I think about leading startups. That's
a really interesting, I recently did a podcast interview with somebody who said you have to live in San Francisco for 1 year. as a founder, because just to see the big dreaming and everything, which is I'll take that, I guess. But it is true, not to pick on any other part of the world, saying New York is better. We're not doing that today, but I would say, because New York City is not a tech town per se, it's become much more so, but it's a town of media and fashion and Wall Street and other things. Like, there's a lot of business in New York City, and like, it's just hard. Like, it's hard to walk down the street without, going bankrupt in this town. Like, it's just a hard place to live, or like have a brick fall off a building, or a pigeon go to the bathroom on you, or some bad thing happen to you. So you just got to be street smart and tough and practical. And so building some loosey-goosey startup that doesn't have a business model is really tough to do here. And so people kind of figure that out. It's a really interesting point. Now, I do want to, we'll talk more a little bit about how you've been running the business ever since, but I want to just return back to this who you were before ClassPass, which is that after ClassPass, you had this role, and then you went out and you did a bit of a portfolio career, and now you're back into a full-time job. And, a lot of people, there's upsides and downsides to the full-time job or the portfolio job. And you've kind of done them both. And you might have stayed in portfolio forever, who knows? And maybe you'll do it again later. But like, talk a little bit about the trade-offs of being in a full-time versus being in a portfolio in your mind now, having done those two things.
I love both. But there's different moments, I think, in one's life that one might fit better. And there's different people who each of those might fit. I always said when I did my portfolio work, and just for context, my portfolio work was advising CEOs and founding teams. And I would usually work with 4 to 6 a month or at any given time. And when I did that work, I always said my days were all sevens. No matter how poorly something went for a company, no matter how well it went, it was a 7. And there's something kind of nice about that. There's something reliable. I didn't get too excited about a company's success, but I also didn't feel it as emotionally if the company wasn't doing as well or what have you. When you operate, it's tens and ones. And guess what? Those tens and ones that you feel, the tens on the highs, the ones on the low, can often be the same day. I can't explain to you how quickly I went from my sevens to the tens and ones. I said to myself, I'm ready to go back to the tens and ones. What I think I was shocked about is how quickly I hit the 10, but also the 1. And you really have to have the stomach for that. And so I think for people who think about going back full time, particularly an earlier stage company, being ready for that is something I really just talk to people about, who, especially as they've consulted for longer and longer. I see a lot of people who've served as an advisor or consultant for many years. It's hard for them to go back. Become a little bit stuck with it because sevens, there's something nice about a 7. But I knew for me, I never personally would get the satisfaction I did in advising as I would full time, because I love the team aspect. And as an advisor or consultant, you never feel that fully embedded. You feel like a 7. And I was ready to feel the 10s and the 1s. So I use that analogy a lot, but I think it really works. I think the one other thing that I'll just point out is, I think what's surprising to people is they think the 10s and the 1s, that example kind of applies at the earlier stage. It applies throughout the startup journey. Especially now with kind of, a lot of companies from the 2020, 21, 22 era being overvalued, and there's a lot of things misaligned internally, is the ups and downs of startup world really exist from the earliest days, but it could exist through a growth equity or a Series D or kind of pretty far along. And so I love it. I think my life will vacillate between the two, but I absolutely love what I'm doing right now. And I can't think of a better kind of executive product fit than what I do right now.
Yeah, it's interesting. I never thought about the 7s versus 10s versus 1s, but I do think, the way I think about portfolio is you're right. It can just be a bunch of 7s unless you pair it with something. Like, for example, if you're a writer and you write your own books, that's where you get the 10s and the 1s. Sure. So you can get those for yourself and then have the 7s to have more stability and stuff like that. But it is a really, people get trapped sometimes in one or the other. And the ability to move between the two is interesting. And by the way, given the fact that we live in a time where there is no stability, you've got to be like water and flow sometimes and like move between the two. So that's an interesting perspective. Now, I want to turn to your time at Resort Pass. So you joined the company and, you go off very impressively and raised $26 million in 2022. Not an easy time. VC winter. How was that process? Like, what did you do? What did you learn? Like, what was it all about?
So when I took over the company, my original plan was to raise $5 million. The
Mm-hmm.
original deck I have says $5 million is what we're raising. We wound up raising north in the end, even of 26.
Mm.
And that was a testament to two things. Number one is that the company had been very capital efficient, which all of a sudden come 2022 is very in vogue. It wasn't in vogue anymore to just have raised the most and to just kind of be far ahead of where you really are. But this company had avoided raising capital during that time period. And so had never raised that much capital. And that was seen as very attractive to investors. The other thing was the product market fit was just so obviously there. One of the most validating things, I was just taking over the company and I was concurrently raising for the company. Actually, interestingly, when I was raising officially, I didn't have a role with the company,
Mm.
meaning I kind of signed my agreement with the company after I had actually been fundraising. And so I'm out there raising the capital, and all these investors are doing diligence. And when they're doing their own diligence, what's coming back time after time across all these investors is both how much users like the product and how much hotels love the product. Now, I obviously had that theory, and that's why I was taking on the role. But I was new to the company, so it was really validating to me just taking over this company. I'm like, cool. When all these investors are doing their own independent diligence, it's coming back so affirmative. Again, I obviously believe that going in, but just seeing that occur. So I think the reason we were able to raise so much in excess of our original plan was because the company had been very capital efficient and the product market fit was so clear. And I think one other thing to mention, many of the people who wound up really investing were people I'd worked together with for many years. I've been in the startup community for 20 years, and I've developed the people that I just love partnering with. The original investor in the company was an incredible guy named Sar Gur. Sar is on the Midas list and one of the top investors. He's also a total mensch, just a good human being that you'd love to partner with. And he was the first investor in ClassPass. And so he was the one who originally called me on this company. And so as a starting ground, I knew that when I got to work with Resort Pass, I was going to get to partner with one of my favorite investors I've ever worked with. Those kind of relationships are really important, who you partner with. And I knew as a starting ground, I had an incredible kind of anchor partner, with Resort Pass.
You've just brought something up that's so important, and I'm curious if you agree with me. A lot of people think of VCs as being like a board meeting is a test. Your VCs are there to give you their money, and if you don't perform, they're going to screw you over. And they don't really know how to run a business like it's like an adversarial relationship, which I can understand, and that does happen, by the way. But the way you're talking about it is like, hey, these are people I really like that I want to have around. We know each other, we trust each other. So like when you have a problem or a concern, you're not like freaking out that your VCs are going to screw you over. You're like, oh, my VCs probably help me, and hopefully. And it sounds like there's just the relationship's a lot less fraught than it could be. But generally, I would say a lot of founders don't feel that way. So what do you say to that? Like, how would you, do you agree with what I'm saying? Like, how does one convert from the fear into the place where it's like, wow, this is really awesome?
I wholeheartedly agree. And that's why I would encourage, entrepreneurs maybe listening to really think about, just on a human level, are you excited to partner with this person? There's a lot of promise out there about all the ancillary benefits of a VC, whether that's their brand or whether that's their talent partner or whatever else. None of that matters compared to, are you just excited to be in a meeting with this person, receive a phone call from them? I'll give you a great example. During the process, there was one of, a very well-known VC was very interested in investing in that round that I was leading, the Series B. And I remember he would text me, and I just didn't like receiving the text. And this is before he's an investor. And I'm thinking to myself, why would I ever take this guy's money? I get anxious just getting a text from him. And I pulled out of that process with him. Whereas, if any of my VCs right now send me a text, I'm excited. Like, and I genuinely mean that. Like, oh, what are they writing me about? And so it can feel that way. And, especially if you're out there raising money right now or thinking about it, I would be over indexing on that side of it compared to any of the other perceived benefits of a VC. Here's the little secret. If your company's doing well, you'll always be able to raise plenty of money. It doesn't matter the name of the VC. It doesn't matter what they promise you. Everyone's going to want to go invest. It really just doesn't matter. What does matter is like how you feel as a founder or CEO, and making sure that you just like this person on a human level is the most important part. And that's what I would advise my founders and CEOs that I advise, for 20 years. That same idea.
Yeah. Optimizing for brand name on the VC front is a trap. Granted, like there's sometimes some value, but don't forget, like even the top companies, VC investors they're having failures all the time. That's the nature of the beast. So like if you get investment from, whatever, some fancy Sand Hill Road or some very prestigious, just still a chance you're going to fail. It's probably, it's significant. So it is a really good, this is, just for somebody who's been around the block, right? You just kind of know this. Now you did something interesting, which I get a kick out of, which is that you raised money from celebrities, which is not unusual these days, but you have people like Gwyneth Paltrow and Jessica Alba, Brian Kelly, the points guy, on your balance sheet or your cap table, I should say. What is I mean, I get it, but like if somebody is thinking about raising a celebrity round, like what's your advice to them about how to make it actually matter?
I think it's raising from people that you believe are value add. And so if you think about all the names you just mentioned and a few others that you didn't, they're all people who built businesses. They're connected to the travel, wellness spaces very explicitly. And they're people who have contributed in a big way. Brian Kelly just is one example of that. We just did a panel together at the NYU Hospitality Conference, which is one of the largest and most important conferences in the hospitality space. And candidly, a lot of the people who are coming more from building their own businesses or people who are in the hotel space or in the hospitality have been some of the most valuable people and, contributed to the business. So I think that finding the right people, originally William Morris Endeavor, who's also one of our investors, they came to me after they committed to the round and said, hey, here are some other people in our network that we think could be really valuable. And I looked at the list and I kind of isolated people. I thought, oh, this makes a lot of sense. And I think their list was really spot on. And wound up having a bunch of meetings, and some of those people that you just mentioned were the result of those meetings.
FOMO. All right, we're gonna go to the lightning round. Are you ready?
I'm ready.
All right. Number 1. What's a favorite quote?
You can't do what you don't try.
Do we know who said that?
I don't.
Let's attribute that to your sister, Sally Wolf.
Okay.
I feel like she'd say that. I feel like she would. Number 2, name one book or podcast that every FOMO Sapien should know about.
This is going to be a little bit maybe of a surprise, but The Death and Life of Great American Cities by Jane Jacobs. And the reason is because I think it really gets at the aspect of community. In this case, what makes kind of a city thrive. It's from the 1960s. Jane Jacobs was kind of for those who don't know, is kind of a local New Yorker who basically saw what really worked with cities. And there's such little insights into there. And I think it actually helps even if you're thinking about product management and social and what it means to make connections. So it's a favorite book of mine to this day.
Wow, that's a good one. And I believe she lives on Hudson Street in New York City, if I'm not correct.
That's where the plaque is. She actually wound up moving to Toronto. That's part
of
I
think you and I walked by the plaque together one day, right? Isn't that not true? All right. Number 3, I was in search of ice cream. What is one piece of advice you give to your younger self?
You really can love what you do. And so it might take a little while to find it, but know that for all of us who spend a lot of time working and devoted to our vocations, find the thing you love. And that's not saying that's easy. That's not saying it's always the first thing. But if you really aren't loving what you do, you can do something else. And I think people kind of lose sight of that. If you kind of have accepted that what you're doing, oh, it's okay, like it's just fine, you can probably do something better for yourself.
Michael, on that one, it reminds me, I used to see Andy Dunn of Bonobos around New York City selling his pants. And he just like walked in the room and he sold the product. And I was like, I'll never have that. I'll never have something that's kind of my thing that I do that people know me for, that I love to do. And I was like resigned to that. Now, obviously, I found something like that. And when you find that thing, you know it, and it makes everything feel effortless, which is really crazy. So keep looking, everybody. Keep looking. I think that's really important.
Just one example on that, if I can, Patrick, real quick.
Yeah.
Which is, I met Andy very early in his journey, and I was going to maybe go be his first employee when he was selling pants on Irving Street in New York City.
It's amazing.
And I was debating between 2 paths at that time, that or this other passion of mine that I referenced earlier about politics. And I got really excited back in 2007 about the Barack Obama candidacy. And I ultimately decided, even though I really loved meeting Andy and the product, that where my heart was with the Obama candidacy. And I went and did that. And I remember a note that Andy wrote me, which was basically like, you should go do that. I can just tell that's what you really want to do. So again, just finding what's
That's
great.
really cool. And by the way, the world of pants would have been a better world, but what are we going to do? Finally, what is your most important memory?
What an incredible question.
I know it's not an easy one.
There's a memory I think about that helps me go to sleep. It's a very simple memory, and it's on a beach in Cape Cod. And no matter how stressed I am and the ups and downs of work, when I really am struggling, I think about that beach. I was at that beach over 20 years ago, and there's just a beauty and a simplicity and a silence to it. And to this day, if I close my eyes for long enough and think about that, it can put me to sleep or put me in a really great mental position.
Wow, that's a hack that we can all use. Think about a place that you truly love, and it might help you to sleep. Because, yeah, when I can't sleep, I just close my eyes and say, "Please let me sleep. Please let me sleep," and that works too. But yours sounds nicer. All right, if you want to learn more about Michael, you can find him on LinkedIn, Michael Wolf. If you want to learn more about Resort Pass, you can find them on all the socials at Resort Pass. Michael Wolf, CEO of Resort Pass, thank you so much for being here.
Thank you for having me. A real pleasure.
FOMO. If you like today's show, please be sure to rate it and recommend it to your friends. And as always, you can find me on Instagram at Patrick J. McGinnis, on Twitter at PJ McGinnis, and on the web at FOMOSapiens.com or PatrickMcGinnis.com, where you can get all kinds of free resources to live a more decisive and entrepreneurial life. FOMO Sapiens is recorded in New York City. Theme music is by Mike McGinnis, and editing and post-production is by Josh Elstro. If you like today's show, please be sure to rate it and recommend it to your friends. And as always, you can find me at FOMOSapiens.com and at PatrickMcGinnis.com. To advertise on FOMO Sapiens, reach out to contact@FOMOSapiens.com.